Chris, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time as well.
Yeah, no worries. You worked at Area 51, Skinwalker Ranch, and I believe more recently, Blindfrog Ranch.
I actually I started in the Air Force and then transitioned to the Nevada test site for the DOE, Department of Energy. And then I ended up working the Janet detail for 51, and then Skinwalker Ranch. And then I went out to Blindfrog Ranch a couple times as like an advisor.
Okay.
Or like an extra eyes on the property, basically.
So how did your journey in this whole, were you a fan of the paranormal before you started on this journey?
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of the paranormal since I was in high school as a kid. I'm from a small town in Kansas, and in the heart of the Midwest, there's tons of ghost towns, and each town has like its folklore and rumors and stories. And there was a place called the Poorhouse in Marion County, and I was about 17 years old. And long story short, I ended up working there one summer with a buddy of mine, and this place was legit like poltergeist haunted before I even knew what paranormal was,
Yeah.
And that was kind of my introduction to the paranormal.
Okay.
And the place is still out there to this day, and it's got a lot of dark history, but that's what kind of sparked my interest at an early age. And then I was kind of always into UFOs and all that stuff, and I really had no intention to join the Air Force. It was kind of by luck, by some friends and I. And then, when you join the Air Force, you have no idea where you're going to be stationed at, and sure enough, I got stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in 97 or 98. And that started my whole career, basically. It's a very unique base where you can a lot of doors can open up depending on your background.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's where I kind of ended up started.
And what's the strangest experience that let's start at okay, so from Nellis Air Force Base you then went to Area 51.
Well, no, actually I went from Nellis Air Force Base, I went from there to the Department of Energy for the NNSS, the Nevada test site up in Mercury, Nevada, for the Department of Energy. And then from there I transferred over to the Janet detail for 51 while I was working for Bass at Skinwalker Ranch. It's kind of a long story. Very unique career, I guess. Very lucky, and just happen to know the right people. That's how it kind of works. You got to have to know people to get in the door. And I had a pretty good reputation at Nellis, and that was it. And so I went from Air Force to DOE to the Janet detail to Skinwalker, and then I'm still continuing doing stuff as as not like a hobby, but more of a profession, going out back to the Uinta Basin. And right now, currently, I'm a federal police officer now. So I've got 25 years of law enforcement and working in some of these special areas. So,
what's the strangest experience you've had, and where?
Jeez, I've had a lot of experiences. The one that sticks with me the most is my time at Skinwalker. I was out there for 6 years, and you would think I would have like a laundry list of experiences and stories. And really, I only have a small handful of experiences because I don't like to say something unless I have physical evidence or photography or a second witness. Because there was a lot of times you just kind of shake your head like, what was that? But my most profound experience happened in October of 2010, my second week being on the property. Myself, and I've talked about this before in some other podcasts and stuff, but so my second week on the property, we had a routine down. One officer would go out for like a morning run while the other officer got the daily report done for the night before, and we would take turns doing that. And that kind of allowed us to get our eyes on the property during that time in 2010, because in 2010 Skinwalker Ranch wasn't even a mainstream topic, and back then we had almost 1,000 acres to secure, unlike they have like 512 now. But back then we leased neighboring land, which allowed us more responsibilities to patrol and secure, but also to look for more stuff. But anyways, so on this particular time, like I said, my second week in October, the secondary officer came back after his run and he said, "Hey, I think I found some pretty strange prints, canine prints." And so I'm like, "Okay, well, let's go look at them." I'm from Kansas, originally, and so I lived in a farm. We had horses and stuff, so I'm very used to a country environment.
Yeah.
So the ranch wasn't really scary to me. It was more like being back at home. So I wanted to see what kind of prints they were. So we go out on the mesa, and sure enough, we find very large canine prints that dwarfed our. We had two labs at the time and a border collie dog. So we had three dogs on our own.
Okay.
And these prints dwarfed the labs, and these are full-grown labs. And what was weird about these prints is that it looked like this animal was walking like on 2 feet at times with like a 3 foot, and like had a 3 foot stride.
Okay.
So it'd be like it would be like about 100 yards at like on 4 feet, and then on 2 feet.
Oh.
And then it was weird. It didn't really make any sense. And this was strange. And so we took pictures, and those some of those pictures I posted online on Twitter and stuff like that. Because I have a Twitter account, and I post pictures like pretty much every week of the ranch. If people are interested in stuff.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that day, we're like, okay, that's kind of strange. So we call our boss and tell them what's going on, and their advice is, be careful. And we're like, okay, we'll do our best. It's just us two out there.
Yeah.
So that night, it was like the second night, I believe. I can't remember. It's been so long, but the second night we go out to capture this animal. That was like our mindset. Like, we're going to capture this animal, which is looking back now completely ridiculous. But so we go out that night, and we set up little campfires throughout the whole property. And it was starting to rain a little bit, and we can tell the dogs were acting very suspicious. They were clinging to us the whole night, when normally they're out running around, trying to catch rabbits and stuff.
Yeah.
And we knew something was up, but we couldn't really see anything. And we had NVGs and stuff, but we couldn't pick up nothing. But we can feel like we're being watched,
Yeah.
And so it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. About 3 o'clock in the morning, we decide, hey, you know what? Let's start heading back to the trailer. Call it a night. We had been out all day and night. I mean, it was a long day. And so we backtrack our original tracks, and we find those large canine prints, wolf prints, behind our prints. So this thing had been following us the whole night from a distance.
Okay.
And so now we're like, holy cow, we need to get back to the trailer because now we're being hunted, basically, or observed by something. Yeah. And this animal had to jump on us the whole night. And so we, white light, flashlight, guns out, and we're walking back slowly back to Homestead 1. And we get around the curve, actually, where on the TV show where they talk about the triangle area.
Yeah.
Back then we didn't know what, back then we just called it the curve. I'm about 50 feet ahead of my partner, and as a full moon night, I'll never forget this because this replays in my head every single night. It was a full moon night, and there was clouds in the area from the storm, and the clouds went over the moon, and it felt like the whole vibration in the valley like dropped, like you're walking in water, like the frequency dropped.
Yeah.
And about that time, my partner said, "Stop, I heard something." And I'm like, "What?" And I turn around to say what, and out of the ditch behind us, we hear this god-awful guttural howl growl of something big. And this is in October. The ditch is pretty much dry. It's got a little bit of water, but it's mostly dry. And as I'm turning around walking toward him, this large canine, I would say large wolf, about the size of a deer or a donkey, jumps out of the ditch, lands on the road, and travels west. The dogs go after this animal, and we're worried about the dogs, tussling with the thing.
Yeah.
So we chase off after this animal almost immediately after it runs away from us, and we're running behind it on the road going west. And it was like I blinked, and that animal was just gone. We lost track of it. And the weird thing was the dogs stopped on a dime and like looked at us like concerned, and we looked at them like, what the hell was that? And so we there was a bulldozer nearby, a cat that we had on the property that one of the ranch managers used to plow the road in the wintertime. So we got on top of the cat, and the dogs did a 360 around us, and we were looking, around the perimeter. We couldn't find any tracks of this animal, so we got back to Homestead 1 and started making phone calls and doing a report about what had just happened. And that next morning, we went out to try to find prints, and we really didn't find anything significant like that we found a couple days before, which we were able to document. And then so that was my first experience. And then fast forward, 15 or 5 years later, I'm out, we're out there by ourselves now, out there by yourself. And, by year 5, by year 6, I'm pretty accustomed to the ranch. I'm not very scared anymore. It's like a second home. And in 2015, I'm sitting by the east gate, and I hear that guttural howl growl again, like I heard back in 2010, like to try to catch my attention. And it was there for a second and gone. That was it. But that was like one of the most significant experiences I had on the property. But once again, it's backed by a second witness, and it's backed by photographic evidence. And, it was a pretty intense situation. And then you think that would, more things would happen. And that was the only significant experience I had out there that I would think was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people realize or don't realize is that these things don't happen every day. It's pretty, and I've had quite a few guests from the paranormal world or whatever on the podcast, and they say the one thing people tend to think, if you go into a haunted house, something's going to happen straight away. It's kind of not how it works. Things happen, far out in between or whatever the case may be. I had Caleb Bench on the show a couple of months back. It was so great speaking to him as well. And
great guy.
Yeah, great guy. And what theory do you have on what is going on at Skinwalker Ranch? What theories do you have? Yeah.
My theory, and I've been saying this and documenting this since 2011.
Yeah.
And this is from my own data research and my own time being out there and really absorbing that property, and not just that property, but that entire basin. I truly believe that it's the Native American history that's residual out there. So basically, I believe that Native history, energy, frequency, and vibration is displaced in the natural environment. And, that area specifically at Skinwalker Ranch is sacred grounds. So it might be just as simple as, we're trespassing on land that we don't really belong on. And if you go out there with an ego, or if you go out there with some arrogance, that land knows who you are, knows your true self, and it will expose you. Because I saw it firsthand happen to guys out there. I always approach the ranch with a lot of respect. And that was my number one thing. But during my time out there, I collected lots of artifacts. I found areas of interest, what I did was I took a topographical map of the property back then, and every time I'd find an artifact, an arrowhead, a grindstone, areas of interest, bones, pottery, whatever I found, I took a picture and a GPS location, and I put on the map. And my thought was trying to correlate people's experiences to maybe an abundance of artifacts.
Right.
I thought maybe that was the connection there, because most of these areas that have paranormal hotspots on the TV show and stuff, around that general area are significant traces of artifacts, and that was kind of my focus while I was out there. But oddly enough, when I was doing that stuff, my previous employer didn't really care about it. He was more they were more focused on the UFO aspect of the property. But my professional background before coming to Skinwalker Ranch, I had already spent almost 10 years at Nellis Air Force Base, Creech Air Force Base, the Nevada test site for the Department of Energy, 51, all before even coming to Skinwalker Ranch. So my eyes weren't really focused on the skies because I felt like I had a pretty general knowledge of what was out there. My eyes were focused on the ground because I treated the ranch like a giant crime scene. So that's what I believe. I believe the ranch holds that Native history. And it's not just the Skinwalker Ranch. It's Blindfrog Ranch, McConkey Ranch, McKee Springs, Dark Canyon, 9 Mile Canyon, all that in the Uinta Basin, and all of it has known paranormal activity, known UFO stuff, but the number one common denominator is a Native American history. And here's what's so important about these artifacts. On Skinwalker Ranch, there's a place called the Eastern Valley where I spent most of my time. It's actually north of the East Gate. And if you get a chance, go on Google Maps and look at the area. You can just look from Google Maps and you can tell it was a location that held pretty strong significance.
Okay.
That's where I found most of the artifacts. But in one location on that Eastern Valley, I found artifacts that date back 1,500 years ago to the Archaic period.
Okay.
But in the same exact location, I found paleo artifacts that go back 10,000 years ago.
Oh,
so you have all these overlapping layers of history in one location. You know, why were they out there? You know, were they drawn to the magnetic anomalies in the ground? Were they drawn to something there? You know, but I think that's pretty important stuff.
Were there a lot of petroglyphs and stuff as well? Cave paintings?
I never found any petroglyphs at Skinwalker Ranch. I never did find any. And really, that's kind of my fault, because back then I wasn't really looking for that, because I wasn't really trained to look for that. Now I'm friends with James Keenan and Carl Vibe, and they're really knowledgeable about petroglyphs. So these last couple of times I've been back out in the basin with them, and we've discovered stuff around the basin that are pretty interesting with petroglyphs. But back then, my number one focus was the artifacts, because here in Kansas, when I was a kid, my grandfather used to take me out looking for arrowheads and rock hounding and stuff. So I had a very good knowledge of what to look for and areas of interest specifically.
Okay.
And so, but you know, I have been to McConkey Ranch and seen the glyphs, and I've been to McKee Springs and saw those, and 9 Mile Canyon. I mean, they're insanely significant, especially the ones in McKee Springs that depict a portal, you know. And those go back 10,000 years ago. So it makes you wonder, you know, what was going on out there? Because, you know, I watched the TV show, and obviously I've been out there several times to help with the team. And they're great guys out there. I really enjoy all of them, and they are very knowledgeable, and they bring so much to the table. I wish I would have had them when I was out there, you know. But there's an overall importance of them wanting to document the paranormal with scientific evidence, and I get that, and it's very important. But if you think back to the Native Americans that were out there, they didn't have anything to document that or to prove what they were seeing. They wrote it on rocks, and they sat and observed what they were witnessing, and they evolved from those experiences. And I think that's what's more important, is observing and evolving spiritually, and then carrying on, because that whole area is very important.
I think I mean, things were kind of more, I don't know if pure is the right word to use back in those days with the, you know, with the natives and stuff like that. I think if there was a timeline where contact would have probably been made, it would probably would have been then, you know, instead of like right now, because I mean.
Yep, 100% agree with that. I've said that many, many times. And the reason why, if there was alien contact back then, is because we're dealing with a group of people who have a true understanding of the universe, the earth, and the connectiveness of everything, because they were truly in tune with the environment.
Yes.
And we look at our society now, it's totally chaotic. There's no way there's going to be any contact in the foreseeable future until we get our shit together, you know.
Well, I think the one, and I asked Caleb and Eric about this, you know, when I spoke to them, and I said, don't you guys think sometimes, you know, there's too much of a reliance on data,
right,
to explain? Now I get, you know, people are, you know, they need proof for everything. There's no, do you know what I mean? But what if it's a case of a type of science that us as humans just don't understand, and we just don't have the technology to measure it?
Right. Because, and maybe we don't deserve to know, because of how we are right now. You know, we're so distracted that we don't even sit and observe. You know, when I go to the Uinta Basin, I really make an effort to really absorb the environment, as much as possible. I'm not worried about collecting scientific data. I'm photographing stuff because that's what I love to do.
Yeah.
But there's been several times where I haven't photographed an experience and just absorbed that moment. I believe that's more important to do so, because you can sit there and collect scientific data all the time, but it's faulty. Sometimes that equipment isn't worked. It's not set right. It's equipment error, you know. And what I'm talking about isn't up for interpretation. I'm collecting hard artifacts, evidence, and getting documented and saying, look, this is what's important. You know, this right here is important. You know, this is a tomahawk head that me and my grandfather found.
Okay.
You know, so I've been raised to look for this stuff, and that's hard evidence, and it's not up for interpretation. It's fact. So, but then again, you know, the ranch has. I'm not saying that my opinion is the #1 answer, because let's be real here. During my time, I had no group of scientists. We had no equipment to measure the ground or the skies. We didn't even have a working camera during my time out there, like a working video camera, like to monitor the gate.
Yeah.
So I had to make best of what I could do, which is view the ranch as a crime scene. And that's what I did. And that's what my evidence led to, was the Native American side. And the guys now have insane amount of stuff. You know, I go out there all the time and I'm like, holy cow, it just blows me away. Like Eric Bard finds, I mean, that guy's a genius. He really
he is.
And Travis Taylor, he's smart as a whip too. I mean, he's smart. I mean, he got these guys, I have these conversations with them, and I just like, it feels so awesome, because they really want to figure it out. And I can, if I can help them a little bit with my side, great. But I learn something new every time too out there.
I think it's kind of to them, and I explained, I kind of related this to Caleb as well, and to Eric. I think it's kind of like more the journey in itself.
Right.
That, you know, that's kind of the, you know, that's the fascinating and the fun part, because I still kind of think, look, I don't believe we're alone in the universe. That's my belief.
Me too.
There's just been too many things that have happened, but to try and, a thing that kind of frustrates me, and I saw this with you know, I did a podcast episode about Bob Lazar, and more recently about Travis Walton. Now, there's a lot of debate still going on. You know, yes, Bob Lazar was telling the truth. No, he wasn't. There's no middle ground. Everything has to be in black and white. Now, that kind of, I don't get that. I mean, whether Bob Lazar was telling the truth or not, you know, who gives a shit? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's not gonna.
Because
at
the end of the day, you really need to take a step back and decide, you know, how much of my personal energy am I going to invest into the subject? You know, are you going to be in your deathbed saying, you know, I wish I would have found aliens, or that damn Bob Lazar, or whatever? It's like, no, you got to just invest your energy wisely and focus on that, because you see on people on social media getting these arguments all the time about the dumbest things. I'm like, you guys are wasting so much energy. Like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You know,
and they get aggressive. It's aggressive arguments. Jesus.
You know what because in 2019, I was never supposed to come out online, and that was never my plan to come out online ever, because of my background. I've always worked behind the curtain, basically. But I felt compelled to come out in 2019 because of the whole AAWSAP situation, and I was kind of left in the dark about it.
I was going to ask you about that,
yeah. So I had unanswered questions, and naturally I reached out to my previous employer, and was kind of met with very vague responses.
Was that Robert Bigelow?
No, it wasn't Bigelow. It was Colm Kelleher.
Oh,
it was my and me and Colm have a really, I thought we had a pretty, we have a good working relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, he has a job to do, and this is what, like, I get a lot of people ask me questions. Are you upset because there's rumors that they use this as guinea pigs out there? And they might have, but you got to look at, when you're involved in these special access programs. You know, I spent my whole career working in these programs prior to coming to Skinwalker. Everybody has a position to play, so you have to play your position. So in this case with Skinwalker, during my timeline, I played my position and did the best that I could do, and the people above me played their position. But where these programs fail is lack of communication, and there is a serious lack of communication during my timeline out there. and we were left in the dark on a lot of stuff. And I don't know if that was done by design or maybe because they didn't know either. I don't know.
So what exactly happened there? So they sent some scientist out who supposedly had an experience, and then
Right.
he went back to the Pentagon. They got like a $22 million budget or funding.
Right. And and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the point of impact where all this takes place. So you have James Lakatsky who comes out, or actually you have James Lakatsky who reads the book Hunt for the Skinwalker, and he feels compelled to talk to Robert Bigelow about the property. So he reaches out to Bigelow, and he says, "Can I come out?" And this is in 2007.
Yeah.
"Can I come out to the property?" Mr. Bigelow obliges and says, "Yeah." And they go out there, and then in less than 2 hours, in Mr. Bigelow's own words, Lakatsky has an experience where he sees something inside Homestead 1, or the ranch manager's house. He sees something floating in the sky, but doesn't say anything until like a day later or something. So anyways, he goes back to the Pentagon with zero evidence and gets $22 million going for AAWSAP program. But the part that strikes me as odd is Mr. Lakatsky never comes back to Skinwalker Ranch. So if you have a strong connection to the property, why are you not out there trying to open up Pandora's box? Because that's kind of how the ranch works. You know, people are connected to the property, and sometimes I felt like I'm connected to the property. I felt like the more time I was out there, more layers are being pulled back. I mean, honestly, I really felt like I was being guided out there to find the Native American stuff. Nobody else prior to that had found anything related to that. They knew the history, but they didn't find any artifacts or stuff like that, or areas of interest. And I found plenty of areas of interest. Some things I haven't. There's some areas out there that I've kept secret because of they're sacred areas, I believe. So I don't forecast them publicly. But anyways, back to the Lakatsky thing. So he never comes back out to the property. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a huge missed opportunity, because why would you not want your asset, the guy who had the #1 connection, come back out? Now, if his answer is because he had a bad experience or hitchhiker effect, well then, okay. So if people are having bad experiences, why are all of us out there left alone indefinitely? So my family's expendable. My colleagues' families are expendable. That's where it gets kind of messed up. And that's kind of what my questions were to my previous employer, like, hey, we need to have a talk about this.
Yeah.
And you need to tell me what's going on, because am I going to develop cancer down the road? I had an MRI done 2011. It's just, I have so many more questions than answers now.
Did you guys know about the amount of radiation that was out there?
Absolutely none. We had no idea about radiation out there at all, period. And which is scary, because I do know about radiation from working at the Nevada test site.
Yeah.
I'm very knowledgeable about radiation exposure and how dangerous that really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, at the Nevada test site, you wear a dosimeter on your body armor that measures your energy, your radiation levels if you're exposed. And we didn't have that at Skinwalker Ranch. And we did not know about any type of radiation out there whatsoever. None of us did on my team.
And did Bigelow and your employer, were they aware of the amounts of radiation while you guys were there?
From what I've been told, and I got an email to confirm this, what I've been told is that NIDS did know about the radiation, but it was fleeting radiation, kind of like on the show where it's there for 1 second and gone the next.
Okay.
But they knew about that radiation, and that was never ever passed on to guys like me and the other officers who worked out there. And remind you, there was only 5 of us really total of officers who worked out there during that crucial time. A small handful. And then there was probably maybe 12 at the very end, but very small handful of us that were working out there. Wow. And I'll tell you right now, man, I've had medical examinations currently, and I have had follow-up MRIs. And I have a friend of mine who was out there too, kind of before me, and he's got a slew of health problems. Now, I'm not saying that the ranch has directly affected his health problems, but all of us seem to have a thyroid problem, and thyroid problems come from radiation exposure. So, I mean, it's just not, And I'm not making assumptions here. I can back everything up what I'm saying with facts. So it's just, I have medical documentation that says, hey, there's something wrong here. So I'm currently, keeping track of that right now. I eat healthy, I work out, I stay in shape. So, and then knowing the dangers of the property, that wouldn't stop me from going back out there because I love being out there.
Yeah.
I love exploring the property. I love all the stuff I found out there. I love the team that's out there. So even knowing the dangers, that doesn't bother me. So what bothers me, well, like I said, was the lack of communication, because if I did know that there was radiation out there during my time, I probably wouldn't have slept so many times outside on the rocks with the dogs.
Yes.
And I did at night.
Yeah.
For the last couple of years of my tour out there, I would sleep at night with the dogs on the rocks. And just because I love being out there, I love, I felt like the more time I immersed myself in the environment, the more layers are being pulled back.
Jeez. I mean, there's so many. Yeah, it's kind of like you said. You guys were. It felt like you guys were being used as guinea pigs.
It did. It did. Honestly, it did. And we kind of joked around about that, but we didn't think it was serious. But I tell you what, and I said this in another podcast, in 2019, I met a lead scientist, and the first 3 questions he said to me, and this was on camera. Yeah. He said, number 1, did I know about radiation? And I said, no. And then he said, number 2, did I know about $22 million? I said, no. And then the last thing he said to me was, how does it feel to know you were possibly a guinea pig in all this? And I said, if that's true, I don't feel very good about it. And right when he said that, my whole mind flipped upside down, like, holy shit. Now things make sense.
Yeah.
Now things make sense. While we were left alone out there, Colin was never out there. Bigelow was never out there. All these guys that are the ones who talk the most about Skinwalker Ranch were never out there. So it was just me and a couple guys holding it down for years.
I heard that Robert Bigelow made a statement that he will never set foot on Skinwalker Ranch ever again. Now, as soon as we started speaking, I always thought, okay, well, possibly it's because he's had bad experiences or whatever the case may be, but it could just be because of radiation. Right, that could very well be it. There was something online that came out last week that I think Travis Taylor even said it in an interview during Phenomenon. He said something like, Bigelow was convinced that the ranch caused his wife to die. Oh, was the word? And I've heard this before too. I've heard that Mr. Bigelow truly believes all the negative blowback in his life from his, I won't say all, I know a lot of his personal life. I'm not going to air it out. Since his wife, I'll talk about that. But his wife developed leukemia and got sick and died of cancer, and he believes that was because of his interaction with Skinwalker Ranch. That's what I've heard. Now, I take a step back and I'm like, okay, well, if this guy who owned the property truly believes that, how can he morally keep people out there on the property? Ranch managers, myself included, other officers. How could you? It's completely unethical situation. It maybe not be illegal, but it's definitely unethical and immoral. So you're saying if he's coming out and saying that the ranch killed his wife, so my wife and 3 sons are expendable, I tell you, man, that's kind of walking on shaky grounds. I went to Las Vegas in July with my family to see friends, and because I lived out in Vegas for 20 years, and so I have a lot of friends out there, a lot of connections, and so we went out in July to go see friends, and I made it a point to go to Mr. Bigelow's private office because I know where he stays at. I went to 4 locations to talk to him about this and to talk to Colin Kelleher about this. Radio silence. I emailed Colin, told him I was coming in town. I went to Mr. Bigelow's personal office, left a message and said, hey, I'd like to talk to Mr. Bigelow and thank him for my ranch photography. I want to talk to him about because that's the thing that people do not understand when it comes to Skinwalker Ranch. If you focus on the negativity and the darkness, it focuses back. It does. And it affects you. I focused on the positivity, and I share that through my photography. There was a time at the very start where I focused on the negativity and the darkness, and it focused back. And I took a step back. And once I found the Native American stuff,
it flipped my whole perception. And then I focused on the positivity, and my whole experience changed for a positive. And then come to find out, years later about this AAWSAP program, and then Bigelow saying this and radiation. And I'm like, whoa, no, none of this was told to us.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I still focus on the positivity, which is why I still go out there, because I still have unfinished business out there. I'm still discovering stuff. So.
And yeah, it's a tough one. It's I think emotionally it must be a pretty,
I will tell you, man, since 2019, I have lost insane amount of sleep over this. It's affected my life, my work, my professional work, my family relationship. I tell you what, when the first episode of the TV show aired, me and my kids and my wife were watching, and the first episode's about radiation. And my wife looks at me and she's like, I knew it. I knew there was something bad out there. Because honestly, I would come back from the ranch, all of us, every single officer would come back from the ranch after being out there alone for 2 weeks, and you'd feel lethargic, tired, sick. And we thought it was because of the workload of working so many hours out there. But now it might be, well, maybe I was stumbling around pockets of radiation that was making me lethargic. Every time I would come back, I felt like I couldn't even operate for a couple of days after coming back to Vegas, and not just me, every single officer had reported the same thing, so, and even I've talked to the recent caretakers out there, Candace and Thomas out there, great people, by the way. And they have mentioned that as well, leaving the ranch and feeling like lethargic and kind of like down,
Yeah.
So I don't know. My wife, when we talk about Skinwalker, it was a really dark time for her, because she was a brand new mom we had a brand new child, and I was gone all the time up to the ranch, back and forth. It was a very dark time for her. And it's kind of weird because now I see the ranch and I see the TV shows and the documentaries. And on one hand, I'm very happy and I'm glad that the basin gets that attention. But on the other hand, I feel like kind of disgusted, because for me, when I look at the ranch, it was a very dark time for my family, and being alone out there is a whole different ball game that most people will never experience. And when I say being out there alone, I'm talking being out there alone and then doing the workload that we had to do, which was literally 24-hour operations for 2 weeks by yourself, which on a tactical security standpoint is impossible. You never put an officer alone on a property to secure by themselves. That is a huge red flag. But we did it because that was the job. And being prior military, that's kind of what you do. We work more with less, and you press on, you get the job done, you get the mission done no matter what. And that was kind of everybody's mindset. You don't want to make the boss unhappy, because you don't want things to happen on your watch, like somebody coming out there and smashing the gate, or God forbid, hurting one of the ranch managers. So you are constantly pegged in the red zone the whole time you're out there. You're operating at a very high level of anxiety, stress, fear. I mean, it's,
well, then you got the paranormal aspect of it as well. So
and then you take the paranormal aspect on top of that. And I remember like walking. I remember like walking at night. I had a routine down where in the daytime I would hike all day long with the dogs and go on the southern tree line and go everywhere I can at daytime. And then at nighttime I would do the exact same thing with NVGs, all in black, with the dogs. But the difference in day and night, the psychological aspect of being out there in darkness, and then by week 2, you're out there doing patrols and you see a raccoon or you see something and your mind starts playing tricks on you. Like, is that, what am I seeing? You have to really take a step back and be, okay, I have to focus on what's going on here.
There's one report that I heard. There was a woman, I think she was the vice president of a bank, and her husband, I think they were working at the ranch, and she took a shower, door was locked, and when she got out the shower, the door was still locked, but her towel and brush was missing, and she ended up finding it in the fridge or the freezer.
That was during the Sherman era. when they were out there.
And her husband, who was, I think he was an expert in artificial insemination, he found, I think it was a post hole digger or something, 70 feet up a tree.
Right. And my thing is, where's the photographic evidence of that?
Yeah.
If you see a post hole digger in a tree, you better get a camera.
You're gonna take them. Yeah, you're gonna take pictures. Yeah.
If you're missing like your hairbrush and towel, that could be maybe just a memory slip.
Yeah.
Now finding it in the refrigerator seems kind of weird, but if there's something that outlandish where you're saying that there's something 70 feet in a tree, you better document that, or you're gonna look like a crazy person. And that's the difference between. And that's why I photograph everything out there as much as possible, because coming from my background with the DOE, where I held a Q clearance, just talking about the paranormal or UFOs or werewolf stuff, whatever you want to call it, you can lose your security clearance overnight, because they'll view you as a nut job, basically. Like, this guy's crazy. There's no way you can get a clearance.
So you had a Q clearance where at 51?
At the DOE. I had a TS for 51, and then a Q clearance for the Department of Energy. Yeah.
So what is your opinion on Bob Lazar, out of interest sake?
I believe he worked at 51. Now, what he did out there, only he would know, because that's how it works. So,
but a lot of the stories. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, a lot of the stories make sense of what he said, but there was one thing that he slipped up, and I caught it, and it was a big red flag for me. And I haven't mentioned this online, or I haven't mentioned this to anyone really.
Okay, cool.
But it sits in the back of my head. When he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about his time at 51, and he said he worked at S4. And I can't confirm or deny S4. I never saw the facility, but I was also at a station at the Janet Detail in Las Vegas. Now, when I worked for the DOE side of the house, that's a whole different world. And I will never be able to talk about my time at the DOE, the stuff out there. That's just how it is. I mean, I signed NDAs pretty much for life out there.
Yeah.
Anyways, but in Bob Lazar's story, he's mentioning that he walks past an aircraft and he touches it. He says he walks past an aircraft and he touched it and he got in trouble.
Yeah.
When he said that, I was like, no. I will tell you right now, a PL1 resource, a priority level 1 resource, you're not getting within 50 feet of that aircraft, because there's guards around that aircraft.
Okay.
So nobody's touching anything unless you're working in a direct area where you're working on an aircraft. But nobody's just walking by nonchalantly and touching an aircraft. That's how you get shot in the face.
Yeah.
That's how you get arrested. And if he did that, and he said he did, they would have fired him immediately on the spot.
Yeah.
Because I've seen that happen, where people have screwed around PL1 resources, and I won't say what aircraft, and grouped around and did something like that, and they were gone. They were immediately fired. We had a pilot one time, Nellis Air Force Base is the home of the fighter pilots, and we had a fighter pilot actually from a different base fly over 51 against air traffic control commands.
Okay.
And when he landed at Nellis, he was immediately arrested and fired. And basically his wings were ripped off his shoulders. The base commander was waiting for him to land and basically fired him. And that's just flying over restricted airspace. Bob Lazar saying he walked by and touched an aircraft. I don't buy that. That's a huge red flag. Now, everything else he said makes kind of sense, but he can also got that intel from just working in the areas, because people talk out there. Yeah. Because the Air 51 is another. It's an Air Force base, so it's a testing base, and so it operates like a normal Air Force base with just more secrecy. Yeah. And some people talk. People have relationships. People make alliances. People talk. Now, you can't talk about what your job is, but there's enough intel around there. People know what's going on. So
I think the one thing that kind of bothers me about the Lazar story, and I've said, like, some days like I wonder, shit, this guy's telling the truth. And then some days I'll be like, nah, it doesn't really matter either way to me. Looking at the bigger picture. But the one thing that kind of bothers me is the reason, if it's true, why he came out. Because his reasoning was supposedly, we harboring these alien spacecraft and whatever, and to me that's like, and a lot of people, again, for some reason, in these little UFO chat rooms or whatever, or Reddits, they say no, the government should, or the national defense should make this known to the public. Now, to me, and I think to any person who's really actually thought logically about this, well, okay, so they need to make it public that they are reverse engineering potential weapons of mass destruction to the general public, because if the general public knows this, Russia's going to know this. If Russia knows this, the Chinese are going to know that. I mean, there's currently a war going on between Russia and the Ukraine, and the reason why the US, is as dominant as it is because you got the best tech.
Right. Couple things there. One, three things. Bob Lazar thing. When it comes to Bob Lazar, I always say you need to judge a person's character. If their character is flawed, if they have flaws in their character, then their story to me is not. I'm not going to listen full-heartedly. I want to believe Bob's story. I do, because I love that fantasy. I love that fantasy aspect of it. But when he says things that he touched aircraft, especially if he's saying it's alien aircraft or that was not, I promise you that is not going to happen out there or anywhere at any Air Force base, just a normal Air Force base. You go and try to touch an F-117 stealth fighter, which is very old technology. You are going to jail and your face is going to get smashed on the ground. Now, back to you said about the national security thing, you're 100% right. People want disclosure. And that's, I always say that is the most ridiculous thing, because I get, on one hand, we want disclosure and people say, why pay taxes and stuff? But the way the United States keeps the edge is because we have the technology to reach out and touch somebody. We also have the global positioning where we have our bases all over the world, where we can immobilize in less than 2 hours and attack a country. No other country can do that. And the overall objective for the United States Air Force is air power global dominance. And the number one way that is achieved is by keeping everyone in the dark, including our enemies, the people in the Pentagon, our own allies. We keep everyone in the dark. We're not going to roll out new technology unless we absolutely have to roll it out. And just think about this, the Tic Tac UFO. Maybe that is our technology, right? And I believe maybe it is. But if we rolled that out right now, the Tic Tac, it would replace trillions and trillions of DoD resources overnight. It would replace fleets and of aircraft in the Navy, everywhere. And all that money would be just obsolete tech. The U.S. isn't going to do that until it uses that tech out completely. I believe all the new technology that's going to come out is going to roll out under Space Force.
It's kind of like a new model cell phone that comes out each and every year. Do you know what I mean? They're not gonna make the ultimate phone because they're gonna lose all the revenue in between. Kind of.
Yes. Because it boils down to money. It really does. It boils down to money, jobs. It boils down to that. People always say, well, if we have technology like the end of the war in Russia, why aren't we using it? Well, maybe our government doesn't want the war to end. Did everybody think that? I mean, let's face it. We're talking about war. War is not going to go away anytime soon, unfortunately. And which is why a real alien disclosure isn't going to happen anytime soon. They would have already been here and said, hey, if aliens were monitoring us, and maybe they are, if they are monitoring, they're probably using us as a resource. But if they are going to get involved, they've had plenty of time to come in and get involved and shut stuff down. And right about now would be a good time, since Putin's talking about nuclear war. Yeah, it's like, this is getting pretty serious here. Who's going to step in?
Do you think that the fact that, and I asked Caleb the same thing, the fact that there is a TV show, you know, The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, do you think that takes away from the credibility of the research? Because obviously there are people saying, well, it's a TV show, so, you know.
I think a little bit it does, but also it makes you wonder if they're using the TV show to push the UAP narrative down everybody's throat. Like they're using that to, because that's the new narrative now, right? That UAPs are a threat, that UFOs are a threat. I keep hearing that everywhere, seeing interviews of people talking about UFOs are a threat. I'm like, how can you say that at the same time saying UFOs have been here for thousands of years?
Yeah,
so
if they were a threat, they would have surely done something.
They would have done something 1,000 years ago. Why?
Yeah.
Now they're a threat. They're no more of a threat than sharks in the water. Yeah. There's more people that die from shark attacks every year than people that die from UFO encounters. You know, and on top of that, we're going to sit there and perpetrate this fraud that UFOs are a threat, and that's going to be the selling point with all this stuff. They want to say it's a threat because what happens if you say UFOs are a threat? And it might be our own technology that we're saying is a threat. That means that the DOD defense budget increases and more money goes into special projects. And more money could, and then new technology will roll out under Space Force to fight off this new UAP threat. And that's not going to happen. They'll use that technology to fight Russia and China and everything else, which is great, whatever. Yeah. But there's this, and this is my opinion, but it's also my opinion based on where I used to work at. Yeah. And also, I mean, I want to believe in UFOs are coming here. I want to believe in aliens. I do. 100% of me wants to believe. And I do believe that there's alien life forms out there in the universe, like you said as well. But with my professional background, I can't fully go full in on that narrative yet because of where I used to work at, you know? Yeah. I believe that most of it's probably our technology. And like I said, Bob Lazar saying he walked by and touched the aircraft. No, that's not going to happen. You're going to get arrested. You're going to get fired immediately if that happens. I tell you, and I know that for a fact because that was my job, was protecting assets like that. Yeah, for a long time, and that's just something you don't do.
Yeah, he almost made it sound like he was walking through, like a car dealership.
Just walking through a hangar car dealership, and just I'm going to touch this UFO. Yeah. No, man. No, that ain't gonna happen. I'll tell you. I have friends that still work out there, and we talk. You know, especially during the whole Storm Area 51 thing. And all my friends were pissed off because they had to work so much overtime because they really thought people were gonna get out there. You know, but the thing is, people don't realize even if you storm the gate of Area 51, you're gonna die of dehydration before you get to any type of hardened facility out there. There's overlapping layers of security out there where it's silly. We should just leave that place alone and let them do what they're doing because it keeps the United States and our allies safe. Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line of it, you know. And if they're housing tall whites or aliens, okay, cool. I guess the United States is the only one privileged to that type of alliance with aliens. Nobody else is. It just seems silly to me. It really does. And that's why I said this whole threat narrative with UFOs is being pushed. And meanwhile, in the United States alone, 650,000 Americans die from heart disease. I would say heart disease is a threat. We have child trafficking, fentanyl's coming to the border. You know, those are threats that we need to neutralize before we worry about UFOs. You know, it just seems silly to me.
I think it's the sensationalism about it as well. It's a fascinating story. It's kind of just where you push the narrative. And obviously the narrative will get pushed where it's you know, like you said, budgets get allocated for this, and it comes down to money.
And the people that came out in 2017 talking about this whole UFO UAP thing to begin with, once again, I asked, where did you work at? Just because you work at the Pentagon doesn't mean you're access to this type of information. You have to be boots on the ground at these locations to know what you're talking about. And the people that are at those locations don't have a social media online presence. You're not going to know about those people until they're on their deathbed, you know, that are working these real sensitive areas.
What is your take on Louis Elizondo?
I think I think is very good at his job, which is counter intel.
Yeah.
I think really I really feel kind of confused a little bit, because if he says his position was the director of ATIP, right? So ATIP stands for Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, but he was never given access to our full inventory of aircraft. Then how can he identify a threat if he doesn't know what he's looking at? You know, he does a good job of pulling out cards that have like airplanes on them and stuff. It's like a sleight of hand magician trick, saying, you know, if I see an aircraft, I know what it is. Well, usually if you're in an aerospace position to identify threats, those are going to be people in the Air Force predominantly, because once again, it goes back to air power global dominance. So I think, you know, and then there's Chris Mellon said that he's the one that leaked the 3 videos, right? So,
yeah.
And that happened in the Pentagon parking lot. Okay, so the Pentagon parking lot is under 24-hour surveillance. There's obviously surveillance of that, which leads to my next thing. Because of that, Air Force OSI was the lead investigation on that situation, right? So that right there tells me, okay, if Air Force OSI is investigating these leaked videos of UFOs, that might mean it's our technology that was leaked. And the Air Force OSI was like, there's not enough damage and evidence here to put our new technology at risk. So go ahead and run with it. If you want to run with the UFO narrative, go ahead. You're going to mask a perfect deception for us without us even trying. So they might have just let them run with it. And so, yep, it's UFOs, 100% alien technology that just hangs around Navy aircraft carriers.
So it's like misdirection.
Yeah, it's just total misdirection. And I think Elizondo, and I've never met the guy personally, but I have nothing against them. I think from everything I've seen online, he seems like a very smart individual, you know. But also it boils down to a person's characters. You know, I don't know him personally, so I can't really say anything about him. You know, I've seen all the stuff online with the new McGowan articles that he released, and that kind of paints a picture of behind the scenes, and it makes you wonder what the hell's going on. You know, there's the TTSA thing, and so.
And Blindfrog Ranch. Are there any similarities in terms of activity between Blindfrog Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch?
There is. I mean, there's the paranormal aspect where there's reported paranormal activity in both locations. Also reported UAP activity in both locations. So once again, the number one common denominator is the Native American history that's predominant on Blindfrog Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch. And it's the same tribe. It's the Fremont Indians. And before that, it might be the archaic Indians before the Fremont that were out there. So both locations have tons of artifacts, and Blindfrog Ranch has an actual burial site on property.
Okay.
And it's very significant. And but Skinwalker Ranch, once again, it's the Native American connection that's overlooked, I believe. And it needs to be more focused on. That's my primary focus. You know, I've been to tons of locations of paranormal activity and UFO spotting, and the number one common denominator is the Native American history at all these locations. I've been to places in Montana, Kansas, Nevada, and Utah, and all these places report paranormal activity besides like houses and stuff like that, and jail cells, whatever like that.
Yeah.
But like places like Skinwalker Ranch, places like Blindfrog, is the Native American history is the first foundation there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, these legends go back from, I was watching a documentary a couple of weeks ago about, I think it was the Tsuni and the Hoki. Those tribes, they were talking about star children. They are
the star people.
Yeah, I mean, they're petroglyphs, found all over the rocks, and it's, I think that, like you said, that should be studied more.
Right.
I think, sorry, Karen. Do you think they should look towards the oceans more as well? Because there's stuff coming out of the oceans that have been reported.
And that's where I'm kind of torn at. You know, I want to say it's all of our technology, it's all of our not, but then again, some of these reports of aircraft coming out of the ocean,
Yeah.
is it coming from a submarine, or is it coming from an interdimensional portal down below the Earth's crust, or inner Earth? I'm up for those. I'm a firm believer in those opportunities. Maybe that's a possibility. I'm definitely, I think the ocean should definitely be more studied for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Before we,
yeah. Sorry.
oh, but that's my. I mean, I believe like when you talk about UFOs and interdimensional beings and stuff like that, that could come from our inner Earth, from deep in our Earth's crust, or the oceans and stuff like that. It wouldn't surprise me,
I think with the whole subject in general, people have to have an open mind. It's not
Right.
it's not black and white. It's not, and I think a lot of these people want answers, and they want answers like right now. I
Right.
think some of these things are also kind of beyond our level of understanding. I think it's beyond our, the physics that we know. And
Right.
again, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I could be talking the biggest load of shit now, but I think, I can't remember if it was Joe Rogan. I think Joe Rogan said it's kind of like an ant trying to understand a cell phone.
Right.
And this could be us trying to understand, the whole UFO concept, what's out there in the universe type thing. Because I think, I mean, it's pretty arrogant to think that we know everything that's going on in the galaxies, the countless universes, planets, whatever.
Yeah,
it does it seems a little. It's a massive concept.
Oh yeah, I mean, even if you went back 100 years and you went back into modern society and you showed them a cell phone, they'd probably think you're an alien. We're talking 100 years, So yeah, there's probably technology far more advanced out there that's coming from somewhere else. It's a possibility, like I said, I'm very open to that. But when it comes down to what comes down to me is the people that push the narrative the most, where they worked at, their character, there's so many red flags I see. And I just sit back and observe, because at the end of the day, like I said before, I invest my time in the Native American aspect. And I go out and I find artifacts, and I talk to locals, and I talk to elders, and I'm with James Keenan and Carl Vibe, and those guys are experts in that type of stuff too. And we go out there, not necessarily pushing a UFO agenda. We're open to it, 100%. And that, it's kind of interesting with Blindfrog Ranch, and there's a spot up in Montana, Deer Lodge, called Red Gate. There's reports of UFO activity. Well, maybe these off-world UFOs need to go to certain places to refuel their aircraft. Yeah. And there's geological formations or magnetic anomalies where these aircraft can come and refuel their aircraft. I don't know. I mean, it's the theory that I believe, but it could be the common denominator as well, as that, but there's also money involved, and looking back, when I look at my life, and then all the places I've worked, and the places I still go to this day, it's just it's a real humbling experience to be associated with some of the guys I'm with, and being able to go out to Skinwalker Ranch and talk to these guys, because I'm still learning stuff. Every time around Eric Bartel, I learn something new, and I talk to Caleb and stuff, and these guys are very smart. But I think I think I mentioned to Eric Bard one time, I said, what if it's just as simple as all the negative blowback on Skinwalker Ranch is because we're trespassing on hallowed grounds? And he was like, I don't think so. But I'm like, well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's just that simple. Maybe we don't belong out there to begin with. The land is ravaged, not by the cast and crew of Skinwalker Ranch, but now there's a UFO campground that drives right over the top of the mesa. That the whole land is ruined, basically. I mean, compared to my timeline. Yeah. So, I'm kind of surprised the tribe hasn't stepped in yet and said, hey, look, this is enough. But the tribe's probably also profiting, because it's bringing money into the basin, which is great if people are going out there to study the Native American history and stuff. That's awesome. Because I think we need to go back to that. I think we need to go back to those teachings, and maybe just take a step back and just be more of an observer, and not get so caught up in the whole dramatics of things, because it seems like you go online and, man, like you said before, if you have any type of different opinion to somebody, you get, I mean, I get emails all the time, like people like, not giving me hate mail, but like questioning me of like, you're full of shit. You know, you never worked at Nevada Test. You never worked here. I can back everything up with my credentials. I have all the credentials to back it up. So I just kind of like, okay, whatever you say, you must be the expert, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and you'll find it's probably like a 30, 40-year-old still living with his parents, stuck in his, stuck in the basement, trying to make a difference in the
right. I mean,
in
some
the
of these
world,
people have some of these people have invested their whole identity in the UFO topic.
Yeah.
We're talking 20, 30 years of their life.
Yeah.
And, and so if you bring up anything that messes up their narrative of what they're invested in, they have like a mental crisis breakdown.
Because their existence is questioned. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like everything can be simultaneous. Why are we not having healthy conversations here about this stuff? I mean,
yeah.
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'll admit to it. If they're wrong, they should admit to it. It's like there's, I like the saying, starve the ego, feed the soul. People need to starve their ego and feed the soul a lot more. There's so many egos involved here,
Oh,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty amusing.
It is.
And those same people now want the knowledge of, again, potential weapons of mass destruction. I mean, it's just not going to go down well.
It's not. And people are like, with these congressional hearings and stuff, and I went to DC twice last year and talked to some of these senators about my time on Skinwalker.
Yeah.
And I can tell they're kind of fishing for more UFO stuff because that's like the narrative now.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell them much about the UFO stuff because, well, honestly, when it comes to Skinwalker Ranch, I didn't witness a lot of UFO stuff. Maybe like one incident that I can remember off the top of my head that I would consider abnormal, But then, like I said, the place I worked at before, I never saw any little green men or anything like that. So
regardless of all the NDAs that you've signed, basically, you have no knowledge that could end the dispute or the question of, are we alone in the universe?
Right. I've never shook an alien's hand, or saw an alien or been in the presence of a location that would house that type of individual or technology. Like I said, humans are very smart and we're very resourceful. And there's a lot of people out in that Nevada desert that I'm glad they're on our side. There's technology out there that's very advanced, drone technology. And if you think about drone technology right now, I mean, you see these little drones that are the size of a cell phone that go out. Imagine 100 years from now, the technology of drones. Our kids or great grandkids will be able to fly a drone to Mars or something. I mean, it's a possibility.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, like you said, I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't even have, 20 years ago, we didn't even have social media. We had internet, but we hardly had internet. I mean, it was this whole dial-up connection, and if there was a cloud in the sky, you couldn't do anything.
Another thing that's a red flag that is, I see more of an online topic now is crash retrievals, right? That's the big one now, crash retrieval. And people saying, the United States has, crash retrievals of alien technology. That's what they've said. And I've been on 4 separate crash and recovery missions myself for the Air Force. And I will tell you, those crash and recovery missions just for our DoD resources take weeks to months for a proper investigation of the fallen aircraft. So if we have a situation where we found an alien aircraft and it's gone overnight, I don't think so. Those type of investigations take weeks. And let's just pretend for a second that Roswell happened and it was 100% alien. And I'm not saying it is or isn't. I don't know. I can't confirm or deny that it is. I want to believe it's 100% alien, but if it was an alien that crashed there, that facility, that area where it crashed at would be locked down. It would be roped off. It would be tarped. It'd be months of scientists, engineers, Air Force investigating that location specifically, taking soil samples, you name it, of why this aircraft landed in our airspace and crashed there. And according to the Roswell thing, it was disassembled overnight, basically, which means either it was small aircraft that was easy to get them out of the area, or it was somebody else's aircraft that they wanted to get out of the area because it would be like an embarrassment. Because I've heard rumors of like it was the Russians that flew over to Roswell and purposely crashed an aircraft, you know, to point a thumb at the U.S., you know, and they want to get that out of there before anybody saw that stuff. You know, that's a possibility as well. I just think when it comes to crash and recovery retrievals, people need to take a step back. There's a lot that goes into that. It's not just, all right, here's a plane that crashed. Let's pack it up in 24 hours. No, that doesn't happen that way. It takes a long time for that investigation to go through because there's toxic materials involved. Yeah. Like one of the last crash sites I went to was two F-15s that collided in midair by Groom Lake when I was in the Air Force. And we stayed out there for over a week until the investigation was complete. But there was toxic fumes in the air. There was, you know, all kinds of stuff. There's bombs around the area. There's so much stuff that had, and the civilians, and that's what people don't understand with 51 and stuff. They go out there and mess around with security and personnel. Like those people are out there to protect you, not from the aircraft, but also there's the pockets of radiation that are out there as well, you know. You stumble around. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. What's going to happen? I mean, end of the day, the narrative's going to get pushed regardless.
Well, I was just thinking now, the fact that you said this about Roswell, I can just imagine there are people that'll be watching this podcast and saying that, yeah, but Chris has to say that. He has to say that because it's right. You know what I mean?
I have to say it because of my background of where I used to work at. But
yeah,
look, my mom was born on Roswell Air Force Base. My great grandfather served in the Air Force at Roswell Air Force Base during that time.
Okay.
During that time, and I want to believe in that stuff. I want to believe, but when I look at it with logical, just from what I've seen online, and that's all I can take is what I've seen online and what I've read online, you know.
Well, I think that's what that's what anyone can do. I mean, right. Well, that's all anyone can do, right. Essentially. I mean, you know, go back to, you know, the Travis Walton, Bob Lazar thing, whether he's talking, you know, whether they're talking shit or not is kind of besides the point. It doesn't really matter whether they're lying or whether they're telling the truth.
Because, yeah, I mean, it's their story. If they want to present it as such, fine, great, whatever. That's everybody can eat at the table here. You know, that's what people don't understand. Is like, if aliens are real, the United States does not have privy over that narrative. That means the whole world has privy over that narrative. You know, everyone can be at the table and talk about it. But if you look at it, it's just the United States that all these hotspots of, you know, aircraft and unknowns and UAPs and UFOs are United States and in Brazil and other places like that. But predominantly, it's in the United States that has this fascination about UFOs.
Yeah, I would say the sensationalism with regards to it is kind of bigger in the US than it is in well, I mean, media in general is just more massive in the US.
You know, it's funny when I was in Las Vegas in July, I went back to Nellis and talked to some old friends that still work in some of these areas, and I asked them opinions about certain individual, you know, UFO celebrities that are individuals out there, and I asked them about, you know, their views on the UAP topic and the UFO topic, and they flat out just laughed at me and said, "We got real shit going on. You know, we're dealing with real world threats. We're dealing with real world situations. We don't have time to live in fake pretend world. We're dealing with real stuff every day." And if you just look, you know, last year with Afghanistan and you know, the 20 years war coming to an end and the debacle of getting all the people out of there, it's just insane. And that, you know, people need to put things in perspective and be like, listen.
Well, there's a war going on right now.
Yeah, there's a war right now with Ukraine and Russia right now. Yeah. It's just, and people are just dumbfounded and numb to it because, especially in the United States, because war does not affect the average citizens in the United States, you know.
Well, I believe the media is a very, very dangerous weapon.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Definitely. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole COVID thing, but it kind of, once COVID just, when the whole Ukraine-Russia thing started, COVID's gone. COVID's kind of taken a back seat now. It's a new thing. The whole Ukraine-Russia thing. I mean, a lot of people still don't know that it's still carrying on. It was big news for a couple of weeks, and now it's boring. Doesn't sell newspapers anymore. So, yeah,
it's crazy, man. It makes me feel like I wish aliens would come down and just eradicate it. Like, we have failed at this experiment. The human experiment has failed. It's time to reset the simulation. It's just like the human species in general has failed. We have failed.
Well, I mean, geez, like, there's so many issues there's so many topics going on now, which I'm definitely not going to get into. I mean, we've got 72 different genders, which is, I suppose fair play if it affects you. I don't know. And then you got, it's a weird time, man.
It is a weird time, man.
It's a crazy time.
At this point right now, if a UFO landed in Times Square, New York, nobody would care, because everybody's so distracted with everything else in the world that nobody would even give a shit about it, because it's like, okay, UFOs are here. And that's another thing. Let's say tomorrow it comes out, or 100% UFOs are real. Roswell was real. Bob Lazar's story was real. 100% aliens are real. What's the next step? Are you not going to pay taxes anymore? Are you not going to go to work tomorrow? Are you not going to go to church? Whatever you want to do. How is it going to affect you in the big scheme of things?
Exactly. Okay, then what? It's kind of like, now what?
You have these people that push that UFO narrative, pretending like aliens land, and they go, "Oh, you're the one that did all those blog posts about us. Hey, come get a free ride on our UFO aircraft." It's like this weird type of tribalism. It's what it boils down to, really. It's like a form of tribalism. I belong to this tribe, the UFO tribe. I belong to the Native American Skinwalker Ranch tribe, the Basin tribe, because that's real. That's stuff that I can prove with physical evidence. It's not up for interpretation.
I mean, if Biden had to come out tomorrow, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, it's just history that I'm focused on.
Well, I mean, we learn from history, essentially. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Well, why aren't we paying more attention to the petroglyphs?
It's because we're taught not to. We're taught in our culture not to look. We're taught in our culture to look down on Native Americans when there was a whole genocide on those people.
Yeah.
But there's no other way to put it. There was a legit genocide on these people. They were forced out of their homes. It's sickening, man. It's just like, I've talked to several elders, I've talked to locals, and they are so down to earth people. And it's like, we failed. We need to go back and relearn and maybe just take a second to sit by a stream or sit on a mesa rock and just observe the environment a little more and really evolve as a person, because that's how I view it. Well,
I mean,
spiritual evolution.
We're a self-destructive species.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny. You say, like, if a UFO landed in Times Square, what would happen is people would probably think it's some sort of CGI, something. Right. I mean, if Biden had to come out tomorrow and announce, okay, everything like you said, Area 51, Bob Lazar, Roswell, all that stuff is true, they'd probably think that he was losing his mind. There would be people that won't believe it.
Right. It's on both sides of the house. Yeah,
it's not a win-win. It's
not.
And I've mentioned this before. I think if for everyone, if this whole thing is true, there would have to be like an Independence Day scenario where, like, the mothership, appears over New York City or whatever. Yeah.
And maybe that needs to happen. Maybe that might unite. I think Ronald Reagan even said that in one of his speeches. Ronald Reagan was talking about one of his speeches about what was it? He was saying, wouldn't it be great to see a unified culture against one common threat enemy, basically implying an extraterrestrial threat. He even says that. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, basically, wouldn't that get the human species on the same planet? And then you look at 9/11, and then for a couple months, the whole world united against the common threat.
Yeah.
And then now nobody gives a shit about it. Now you have people that come out and say that was CGI, you know. It's like, no, people died. People died. You know, I was October 1st is around the corner, and I was in Las Vegas when the October 1st shooting happened at the Mandalay Bay, where 58 people were gunned down. Yeah. And I was working that night, and I was listening to the scanners, and the next morning I went down there and photographed the area. And there were still people out there saying that was a faked event, that was fake.
Really?
Oh yeah, there's all these conspiracies that the October 1st shooting was a fake event, that it wasn't real, that a helicopter was coming by shooting people. There was tons of conspiracy theories, you know. So, end of the day, people will believe whatever they want to believe. It
Exactly.
just, once again, it boils down to whatever energy you want to invest yourself into, basically.
Yeah. So, I mean, the moon landing is a conspiracy as well. So
right.
It's
yeah.
You
have people that believe that there's like millions of people living on the moon and stuff like that. It's like, well, great. I mean, how does it affect your day-to-day operations? You know, I'm not losing any sleep about it. I'm not. I'm just like, okay, I got work tomorrow. That's my focus. I got 3 sick kids right now. It's like, that's my focus right now. You know, it's like,
saying about the lizard, what they're saying about lizard people as well living in I don't know if it's California or whatever. I don't know. I'm not.
Oh, like the reptilians, whatever, and the
something like that.
Well, it makes you wonder, because, you know, dinosaurs lived on Earth, so maybe there was a planet out there that didn't get extinct, and those dinosaurs evolved into a humanoid type reptilian species. I mean, it's a possibility, I guess. I want to throw it out there. It might be real. You never know.
Yeah,
I'm up for it. I'm up for it.
Well, look, it would be cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
awesome.
Yeah, it would be great if everything was true. It would be freaking. I mean,
the simulation would be pretty awesome.
Bring it on. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Chris, thank you very much. Steve, we've gone for about an hour and a half now. Sure. I really appreciate it. Listen, I just want to make, okay, so photography is a huge passion of yours.
Right.
I'm gonna post your website online as well, on the description of this podcast. And yeah, man, what else you got going on? What's happening? What's the future look like? I
am going on a adventure next month with me and James Keenan and Carl the Crusher on YouTube. But we're going to another place next month. I really can't say where, but it's a place, once again, that has Native American connections and the paranormal and UFO stuff. But it's also very close to Area 51. So
okay,